welcome back to our channel. Today we are learning about the exception handling in the SpringRest. Especially we will get an idea how to use @exception handler and @rest controller advice. So let's get into exception. Usually we know the exception is an abnormal termination of a program. If something happens and the program terminates abruptly, then the program has an exception, so it should be handled properly. If an exception is not handled properly in the program, then that program or the API is not a robust API. So we should handle the exceptions properly with the proper error messages. Usually in the Spring REST applications we have three layers. One is controller layer, service layer, and the persistence layer. You know that the whatever the exception happens in any of this layer, it will throw to controller layer. If those exceptions not handled by the controller layer, then the Spring gives the default exception, which is like 500 internal server error. Okay, that has HTTP status code is 500. So how do we handle these exceptions in the Spring Boot REST applications? So to handle these exceptions, we have like a @exception handler and the @rest controller advice. So this @exception handler annotation, which is like a method level annotation. If you are creating any exception handler method, then you can annotate that method with @exception handler and with the specified exception name, so that that exception comes to this exception method to handle properly with the proper error message. But this exception handler method is defined only in the controller, so it's applicable only to the respective controller. If the exception happens in anywhere other controllers, then this exception handler fails to handle those exceptions. So to avoid this and to have the more robust thing with the centralized way of exception, we have the rest controller advice, which is a class level annotation. What happens if you take a class as a global exception handler and annotate that class with the rest controller advice. Okay, thereafter define the exception handler methods, whatever the common exceptions you will get from the multiple controllers, then define there. Automatically the controller will throw those exceptions from there. The Spring directs those exceptions to this rest controller advice class, and it will handle and return the proper error messages to user. So this way is one of the best way to handle the exceptions when you have multiple controllers in your API. Thank you for watching.